specifically, which petition you filed?
Particularly Couples for Christ, but I represent the other petitioners as well, Your Honor.
That's why you spoke about life, protect the right to life, although the petition of the Couples for Christ does not involve the right to life, right?
I don't think it covers the right to life, Your Honor, but the other petitioners actually raised that as a major point.
Yes. And you are joining them?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. I was looking at your petition, Counsel, and I noted that you filed a petition for certiorari and prohibition. Under what rule has this been filed?
65 prohibition, Your Honor, although certiorari was included, but the main point is prohibition, Lord, because we would like to stop public officials performing ministerial functions, Lord, Your Honor, from implementing the law.
And precisely, what is the object of a petition for certiorari?
To stop a particular body, tribunal, officer performing judicial or quasi-judicial.
Quasi-judicial.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And here, has the government been performing judicial or quasi-judicial function?
No, Your Honor. That's why we also included prohibition, Your Honor.
Prohibition.
That's correct.
And in fact, Counsel, are you aware that in many cases that pass through this court, the medium of certiorari has been used, even if there is no ruling by a judicial or quasi-judicial body. Are you aware of that?
I think so, Your Honor. Yeah.
And for example, in our recent case about the party list law, which we deliberated upon in Baguio, the medium was also certiorari and prohibition. Are you aware that in that case, the ruling of the court was there was even no grave abuse of discretion? So, can you, in your memorandum, can you point out the cases where the court disregarded the medium or the vehicle for bringing a case to court and giving recognition to the case because of the transcendental importance of the question raised?
I think I remember one case, Southern Hemisphere, Your Honor. I think there was also a procedural flaw because I think, if memory serves, certiorari also was used by the petitioners, but the ponente and the Honorable Court decided to just go to the merits because of the importance of the issues raised.
In the case of Tatad versus Secretary, what was questioned was the oil deregulation law, and the court recognized the petition. In Bayan versus Zamora, it was the visiting forces agreement that was declared unconstitutional. In Lim versus Executive Secretary, it was the Balikatan that was assailed. And so, it appears to me that you are bringing your case now together with the cases of the others petitioners because of this practice on the part of the court. While it does not technically conform with Rule 65, there are precedents to show that the court will recognize and give due course to a petition that does not exactly involve a ruling by a judicial or quasi-judicial body, right?
Right, Your Honor.
Okay. And in this, in your petition, you state that the petitioners have legal standing because they are taxpayers. What can you say about this?
Well, the legislation will involve the disbursement of public funds to the tune of billions of pesos. And I think it would be a waste of precious public funds if this law is to be implemented despite its unconstitutionality, Your Honor.
But jurisprudence says it can be questioned, the disbursement can be questioned only by one who pays his taxes, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
So, in your memorandum, can you show us how your client, the petitioners, became taxpayers? Okay, you also say that they suffered direct injury. Can you tell us what the injury was?
These are the individual petitioners there, Your Honor, are parents of 5 children, the Rodrigo family. And their children are going to school, and the mother is still in the reproductive age bracket. And the RH law speaks about these 2 important things, among others. The alleged reproductive health rights of a woman, and the sex education issue with regard to the children. So I think they have enough standing and personal stake on this particular action, Your Honor.
What is the transcendental importance of this case?
First, this case, as mentioned by our opening speaker, former Senator Tadad, has divided the nation for so many years. And it's important that this issue be resolved one way or the other. Number 2, it affects the future, no less, of this country. In the sense that, as I was asked earlier with regard to the effect of population control on the long term, and that is the possibility of falling below the replacement rate, we are talking of not only of the present generation, but future generations yet to come. And therefore, I think it's important for us to emphasize that point, not also to ignore the transcendental importance of life itself, the right to life issue, Your Honor.
What other rights, fundamental rights, are involved?
Religious rights, equal protection, free speech, primary right of parents to educate and rear their children, rights of parents to found their family in accordance with their religious beliefs, right to health imposed upon the state, Your Honor.
So, to your mind, these are rights that are sufficiently important for this court to entertain this case, right?
I believe so, Your Honor.
Can you give me a rough outline for us, very, very briefly, the RH law? Outline for us, very, very briefly, the RH law. What are the various phases of the RH law in the 24 or so provisions that it contains?
May I describe it in terms of its characteristics, its underlying premises? One,
you can describe it in lay terms so that for now we can avoid and depart from legalism.
The RH law, I think, is a unique legislation. The country, especially the poor, are suffering from different kinds of serious illnesses. And yet no law, no special law has been passed by Congress to address diabetes, TB, cancer, heart disease. And yet, this RH law specifies a particular or targets a particular what they perceive to be a problem, which it is, and that is maternal death. They would like to reduce maternal deaths, which is well and good, but in the process, they have ignored the more important and more pressing problems, particularly of the poor. So this, I think, Your Honor, is one characteristic that is objectionable on the part of the RH law. Number two, the RH law, again, is so unique that it will harness the entire machinery of government for this particular issue of reducing maternal death and probably also, most likely, controlling population growth. Again, it's a very specific, narrow objective that does not take into account the bigger picture, as I said. We owe it to the future generations that the Philippines will continue on, not only for this generation to the next, but the remotest generations in accordance with our obligation for posterity. But this RH law, if this ever gets passed, we know already because it happened in Japan, Korea, Singapore, Canada, Russia, and the European economies. They are aging. Less and less people are working. In fact, France underwent a lot of political turmoil because the government had to push back retirement because the expense is so huge. It's okay if we are rich, Your Honor. If we are Singapore, we can always attract migrants because we have jobs for them. But who will come to us? If there's not enough workers left to tend the field, left to man the factory, left to run the call centers, and yet to think that the same population which they consider to be a problem is the same population that allows us to export or deploy something like 11 million overseas workers whom we call heroes because they contribute an average of 23 billion to our coffers each year, Your Honor. So I think this RH law is a law that should be avoided. It's a law that we will have to answer for, not only in this generation, for the future generations to come, Your Honor.
And what approaches has the government used to achieve its objective for the RH law?
Simple, Your Honor. Flood the country with contraceptives. That's the only strategy that they have.
Flood the country? Is the government disseminating information?
Yes, that's part of the strategy to inundate, to propagate, to promote, and flood the country with contraceptives and develop a contraceptive mentality among the population, Your Honor.
And to compel people to follow the RH law, is it using the threat of penalties?
Yes, Your Honor. It's in Section 23. But may I also zero in on the poor? The poor are the actually victims of this RH law because they can't do otherwise. In the DOH program called Conditional Cash Transfer, 20 of the poorest provinces have been identified. These are the families living below the poverty line. They're getting cash dole-outs. But before they do that, they have to comply with certain conditionalities. Before this law, reproductive health services and information was not one of the conditions. But with this law, which integrates the RH law into the anti-poverty alleviation program of the government, it means that these reproductive health services and programs will become a condition before each of the poor families can get that 1,500 monthly subsidies. In other words, if you are using the direness of a person, this is poverty, as a way of getting him to participate in the program, in effect you are coercing that poor person because that poor person has no choice at all. So I think there's a coercive element involved, Your Honor.
Would you give us a rough estimate when you speak of the poor? How many are the poor in our population?
According to statistics, if memory serves, Your Honor, at least 25 million are living below the poverty line. These are the people who can't afford to eat 3 times a day. These are the people who can't afford to get the medicine, to treat their bronchitis, their TB, their diabetes. These are the people who can't afford even to bring their children to school. because although public schools are free, they need to spend for their transportation, for their food, etc. These are the poorest of the poor, Your Honor.
Of these 25 million, how many are women who stand to be directly affected by the RH law?
More than 20, if I remember correctly, more than 20 to 25 million are women of fertile age.
Or fertile age?
Yes, Your Honor.
And how many of these would be adolescents? Adolescents, as defined by the law,
Adolescents,
would fall under the ages of
10 to 19, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. I would not be in a position to give you the figures, Your Honor, but I would imagine quite a number, Your Honor.
Can you get government data and put this into your in your memorandum?
We will, Your Honor.
What I keep hearing from you is that the RH law has economic cost, right?
That's correct.
But there must be some other cost. Cultural, moral, ethical, social. And has the RH law addressed this, what I would call, hidden cost of its enforcement?
I don't see anything in the law, Lord, Your Honor, that will address that. In fact, to the contrary, the sex education, which I assume, because it's not written in the law, is intended to, for instance, curb teenage pregnancy. But we know, Your Honor, that the reproductive health law in the Philippines is just a copy of the reproductive law in the U.S., although there were some amendments after some haggling in Congress. But the spirit is still the same. And according to studies in the U.S., reproductive health law in the U.S., I think, was passed something like in the 60s, late 60s or early 70s. And from then on, up to now, teenage pregnancies continue to rise in the U.S. In fact, I have the data here, but I don't think we have to.
Can you just include that in your...
Oh, yes, Your Honor, we will.
What about the use of contraceptives? Would the contraceptives be available only to married couples?
The law, I don't think, says that. In fact, in sex education, among the things that the children will be taught would be the reproductive health devices. They will be taught about condoms. In fact, we have I think a PowerPoint which shows the things that they will probably teach, how to wear condoms, and so I think, Your Honor, the alleged intended benefit that may be derived from sex education is not based on empirical evidence. Empirical evidence is that evidence that the United States, the mother of all reproductive health country, shows that it will actually result in the reverse, because young people will become more promiscuous and curious about sex.
Precisely. Contraceptives are available to married couples and to single individuals.
Yes, Your Honor.
What is the effect if contraceptives are available to the individuals? They will not get pregnant, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
When a woman does not get pregnant, what is the possible effect?
Well, if the woman takes the contraceptive and the contraceptive works, then that achieves the purpose. But the problem is, what if the contraceptive, which has a significant failure rate, does not work? In the beginning, the very premise of the couple is that the woman should not get pregnant out of that sexual act. But if she does, the possibility of avoiding that pregnancy comes to the fore. Because from the beginning, that has never been the intention.
Assume that the contraceptive works. Would that mean that the single individual can continually engage in sex without fear of pregnancy.
Using contraceptives, Your Honor?
Contraceptives, yes.
There is a chance that, yes, she can without getting pregnant, although there is also a chance that she might get pregnant. But what is also to be mentioned is that every time she uses contraceptive, she exposes herself to health risks. The risk of cancer, according to the US DOH, they tallied the causes of cancer among women. Number one is breast cancer. And according to the United Nations International Agency for Cancer Research, the use of oral contraceptives, particularly the combined type of estrogen, progesterone, increases the risk by between 30 to 60%. So if a particular woman is predisposed to cancer to begin with, meaning she has an inherent risk of 10%, you add 30 to 60%. And that's the amount of risk that that person is taking when she takes on the pill.
You're speaking of health costs. What about in terms of morality? What would be the effect of the use of contraceptives on morality?
It will develop a mentality that it's okay to have sex, provided it is safe. And I think that's the underlying premise of this RH law. And a contraceptive mentality, as shown in the US and other advanced countries, will always result in difficult moral and social and psychological problems, Your Honor. It obviously could encourage promiscuity, since there is now liberty to engage in sex without being exposed to the consequences of that act.
How would this affect the family?
If you have a contraceptive mentality, Your Honor, and there is the thinking that if you use contraceptive, there will be no pregnancy, it might be easier for a man, a husband, to actually engage in adulterous relationship because there's no consequence anyway. Unlike if there is no contraceptive mentality or if there is no such law promoting it, even if that husband might think of philandering, he would have to think twice because there is always that risk that that other person might get pregnant.
What if it is the woman who engages in extra marital sex?
It's more incriminating, Your Honor, because she will bear the evidence of adultery.
So what is the overall effect on morality?
It could result in the breakdown of immorality, as we have shown in the US, Your Honor.
If that happens, what is the effect on the family?
It will undermine and weaken the Filipino family, Your Honor.
Would this be consistent with what the Constitution and this law says about strengthening the family?
No, Your Honor, because the family is the foundation of the nation according to our Constitution.
So, RH law is an anti-family law, right?
Right, Your Honor.
Is the effect of the RH law on culture?
Your Honor, what is unique about the Filipino culture is that we are heavy on family. We value family. We value being among or with our family. We value the future of our children. We value our religious beliefs. We value things that other rich nations do not anymore value. But if we allow this law to pass, it might open the floodgates, Your Honor, for our unique, precious values to be threatened and eventually to be assaulted by this Western-sponsored culture that obviously is not suitable to our culture.
If the present generation of adolescents are fully exposed to the RH law, and the culture that it encourages, what do you think will happen to the next generation?
Well, I think we already have a picture. The picture of the U.S., where children don't respect their parents, where according to the studies that we have, which we will submit with our memorandum, young people as young as 12, 14, up to 19 engage in multiple sex, Your Honor. That's the kind of future that we face if we allow this portal called RH law to be opened and expose our young and the future generations to this kind of pernicious cultural phenomenon, Your Honor.
Counsel, culture simply means the way of doing things, the way of thinking, the way of acting or reacting by a group of people. Do Filipinos have this unique way of thinking, acting, reacting?
Yes, Your Honor. I think our culture is unique to us. That's why we, as I said, we sometimes even to a point of being subservient to others because of the culture of, which is I think basically Asian. We are so close-knit. At the same time, we are, to put it in a word, old-fashioned. Now, is that bad? If we're talking of good values, I think that's good. But if what the RH law means of looking forward to the future and being modern, I think that's not the way to go for us.
Is promiscuity a part of our culture?
No, Your Honor. I think it's a great shame for a person, the average Filipino, to be engaging in promiscuous act, Your Honor. It's against the teachings that they listen to and receive in the family. The family is the beginning of education. And our family is generally old-fashioned, very conservative, and for the most part, very Catholic. We value religion, we value things that our old folks value, and I think it's important for us to carry on these values to our generation and to future generations, Your Honor.
Even the RH law potentially will affect also our values as a people.
Yes, Your Honor, very adversely.
Does the RH law have anything within its 24 provisions to address this?
If it which one, the values, Your Honor? I don't think so, Your Honor. In fact, the very essence of the law is violative of those values because it will promote, as I said, promiscuity. It's okay to have sex provided it's safe. That's the essence of a contraceptive mentality, Your Honor.
So is it worth to pursue the RH law considering all these costs?
I think it's not worth pursuing this law. Anyway, there are laws that protect maternal health. The Magna Carta is already there. In fact, the good provisions of the RH law are in the Magna Carta. The only thing that is lacking in Magna Carta are the coercive provisions, particularly the criminal sanctions.
Is the RH law, in that sense, consistent with matuwid na daan?
I don't think so, Your Honor, because matuwid na daan means that it's a path that will lead you to something bright, something promising. But if you are imposing a contraceptive mentality, it will not affect only this generation, but the future generations to come. At some point, if I may offer some personal trivia, I do pre-Cana in our church. And the one question that I will always ask is, how many children would you like to have? To a man. They would say 2 at most. Even without this law, they have already brainwashed the young because of the schools, because of this subtle teachings that were imposed by the originator of this RH law. So what I'm saying is that given the mentality, the present mentality and makeup of this young, if you introduce reproductive health, it's almost a certainty that many of, or some of them might consider, might even be less. You know, if a man marries a woman, the minimum obligation of that couple is to make sure that that woman will give birth to at least 2.1, to ensure the continuity of that family and projecting it to the nation as a whole, to make sure that our race will continue on, not only for the next generation, but for the future generations, because that is our obligation to preserve and maintain our posterity.
Of Section 7 in relation with Section 23A-1. Are you aware that under Section 7, after a referral and there is a consensus objector, then it can be referred to another facility that is accessible, right?
To a Catholic, it's not acceptable, Your Honor.
No. Not acceptable, accessible.
Accessible, yeah.
Accessible.
Sorry, Your Honor. Yes.
A facility that is not that is accessible.
That's correct, Your Honor.
What happens if there is no facility that is accessible?
Although that's a possibility, Your Honor, if you read the law, the entire machinery, the entire structure of government will be harnessed down to the smallest barangay, because the LGUs will be mobilized. So the possibility of a person asking for reproductive health services or information, not being able to get it after an objector has declined him, is a bit sort of improbable.
Still in the last paragraph of Section 7, it says there, no person shall be denied information and access to family planning services, whether natural or artificials. And if there is no accessible facility, would it not that the conscientious objector might still be compelled?
No, Your Honor. Because
to do what he does not want to do.
He cannot be compelled, because that will violate the most inalienable right in our Constitution, and that is religious freedom. Even if we weigh the competing interests, there is no contest, because this person asking for reproductive health service or information is not in an emergency situation. That is the premise, Your Honor. On the other hand, the conscientious objector is being made to choose between following his beliefs and facing the criminal sanction, or avoiding the criminal sanction and forsaking his own beliefs. The gravity of the choice is obvious in the case of the conscientious objector. But what does a person seeking reproductive health services, what will he lose if he's declined the information? As I said, considering the overwhelming propagation intended by this law, there is little possibility, if at all, that he will not get it. But even if he does not get it today, since that provision, actually two provisions, speak of a non-emergency situation, he will always have the time to look for another reproductive health provider to give him that information or service.
I will sum up, Counsel, with this question. By resisting the reproductive health law, are you now effectively towing the line ang matuwid na daan?
It's a contradiction in terms, but I think if by resisting the law, I will actually be following the narrow path, the narrow and straight path, Your Honor.